There's no time.
The time is
13
o'clock.
Hey everybody, it's Tuesday again, and it's time for yet another episode of the 13 O'Clock Podcast, episode 119.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. This one is about the Jinn.
This was actually Tom's idea. I don't think, did anybody request this, or did you just
Yeah, we actually had one. I wanted to do this show before. I had mentioned it to you earlier. But we had one subscriber from Indonesia, which is a Muslim country, or partially Muslim, and he wanted to hear about Jinn and the Jinn stories. And, you know, the Jinn is an interesting concept. You know, Dr. Robert Price talked about Jinn on occasion. And Jinn is basically Islamic paranormal stuff. We'll get into it. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, I actually didn't know a hell of a lot about this until I started doing research for it for the show, and it actually really is very interesting concept, and one that doesn't have an exact analog.
You're right.
In Christianity.
It's not quite an angel, not quite a demon, not really a ghost.
It's own thing.
It's like a paranormal, extra-dimensional being known as the Jinn. Now, in the United States, you know, in our lore, you know, I Dream of Genie, you know, we know him as genies.
Aladdin,
Aladdin.
like a genie that comes
kind of like a genie. And I first came face-to-face with Jinn stories when I was working in Boston. A guy who worked in my office with me was from Iraq. And you know, this was after the first Gulf War, and, you know, we talk a lot. And I told him about Mountain Poltergeist, and he went, "Oh, that's a Jinn."
Yeah.
And, you know, through his cultural reference, Poltergeist is also Jinn. And the more I found out about Jinn through Jinn stories, the more I could see that, yeah, you could describe Poltergeist as a Jinn.
In a way, it's actually a pretty good, it's kind of like a collective term for a lot of things that fall under different umbrellas, like in Western culture. But to them, it's like all the same thing, just manifesting itself in different ways, which is actually a pretty good way of looking at it, I thought. That's what I said. Like, as long, you know, I've had a few days to research this, and I'm kind of hoping that I don't mess anything up too bad. But I kind of got into it, went down the rabbit hole, and I thought it was, like, pretty interesting. Yeah. So hopefully I get it sort of nicely correct.
And for any new listeners, Jenny's not religious. She considered herself to be atheist. I consider myself to be a mythicist. If you don't know what a mythicist is I don't really believe in religions in a literal sense, but I like religions. I see them as kind of like a mythology to teach you certain values and certain concepts that came from ancestors. You know, it's a big cultural ancestry thing locked in within all religions, and they can be useful if applied correctly. If you look at them the right way. I'm not too much into the fundamentalism, you know.
Well, I've always kind of I've found comparative mythology and comparative religion very interesting, and I took several classes on it in college because it's something I've always kind of been interested in. Not because I believe any of it is true, but I'm fascinated by how different cultures interpret different, natural phenomena and things like that, and I'm interested in what their belief systems tell you about what they find important in their culture and things like that. So I like that aspect of it a lot. And like I said, Jinn was something I didn't know a lot about. So I'm kind of glad that you recommended that we do it, because I don't know if I would have, necessarily come to that on my own. Cause
we need to discuss Jinn, the concept of Jinn.
Yeah, but it was something I found really interesting the more I read about it.
Yeah. Is there anything we need to do before we start the show?
We'll do a couple of brief shout outs. As I said, I have finished re-recording the audio version of Faceless Villain Volume 2. And again, I'm sorry it's taking me so long, but it's like I'm having technical difficulty after technical difficulty, and it's really, really frustrating.
Yeah, we captured it this time. The audio quality is very good.
Yeah, I finally got a really good quality, so I'm actually about halfway through the editing process. So hopefully by the end of this week, I'm going to at least start uploading it. And then it'll probably be another week or two before it's for sale, because it has to go through their,
Yeah, and we'll probably give out some free samples to people that gave us reviews in the past.
Yeah. So, if you've been waiting for that, it shouldn't be too much longer, hopefully.
Yeah. We gave out a lot of free audiobooks in the past and never got reviews from it.
I'm still
So
mad about
I'm
that.
mad about that. Now, it's not always the fault of the person. It's because if
Yeah.
they didn't have certain kind of Google accounts, or if they
If you don't have an Amazon account,
Yeah.
and if you didn't, like, it gives you problems.
right,
You know
then
what I mean?
then you can't
so I've
really
heard.
leave one. So
Yeah, and if that's the case, then that's fine.
right, it's just that in the future we're only going to give them out to people who actually gave reviews in the past, or people that actually have Amazon accounts.
Yeah.
That know that they have Amazon accounts.
Yeah, and like I said, if you want to, if you can review it on Audible, that's cool too.
Yeah.
I mean, generally the Audible reviews kind of do come over to Amazon eventually, as far as my experience goes.
Yeah, and subscribe. Of course, patrons on our Patreon account get priority for all free samples
Yeah.
of audiobooks.
Speaking of Patreon, like I said, if you want to give us some money over on Patreon, you can do that, and I'll say at the end what the URL is. But I would like to give a special shout out to I'm a Shrew, one of our patrons, who this week doubled their support. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I think she's up to like $10 a month.
Yeah, that was very
That's nice.
awesome of you. So yeah, we're doing good. We're doing good. Getting more subscribers on YouTube. Getting more.
We'll be up at 500 before you know it.
Yeah,
500
like
a month.
getting more comments on things, like people coming across our show, and it's like you know, it's pretty awesome. So
Well, we were almost coming up on 2-year anniversary, huh?
yeah, I guess it is,
Right.
isn't it? Well, I guess this summer. Well, shit. Now I can't even remember. No, I think this summer will actually be 3 years.
It's been that long, man.
I think. Yeah.
Time flies.
I don't know. I can't math.
And we still got stuff on the list we haven't done.
You guys, I have like the longest fucking list.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a separate list of like all the podcasts. Every time somebody requests something, I put it on the little list. Every time somebody requests a movie, I put it on the little list, and I have this humongous list.
Yeah.
So it's like if we haven't got around to your topic or we haven't got around to your movie, it is on the list. We will get around to it. I do move things around depending on
what current events and what.
it's current events or whatever I feel like doing. Like because sometimes like the little thing will come up that I've scheduled, and I'm like, I don't have enough time to like research that.
Sometimes a serial killer will get caught, which moves something up to the
right,
front too,
exactly.
that
So
kind of
yeah,
stuff.
if there's something going on in the news, like particularly with true crime cases, then yeah, I'm gonna move that to the front of the line. So like I said, it's not that we forget about you or anything like that, because I have gotten like a really lot of good topics and a lot of good movie suggestions and stuff like that. We will get to them eventually.
To put this into a perspective, people, for us to cover everything that's on the list, the show will end up being the size of Art Bell's show. It'll be like that.
Yeah.
We got years and years worth of shows.
You really do. I have at least 2 years worth of
At
topics.
least that.
if not more.
Really, I think we could stretch those requests to actually be like another 5 years worth of work.
Yeah. What I've taken to doing now is like combining some of the cases, like so I could do two on one show, so I can
And there's stuff I could add to that list. I swear to God, we could have our show could be, in terms of hours in length, as long or amount of episodes, be as long as Coast to Coast, like with Art Bell.
Yeah.
He was on for what, 10 years? No,
like
20 years?
Yeah,
15?
like ages.
Yeah,
I don't even remember it.
We can literally do this forever.
Yeah, we're never gonna run out of shit.
Yeah, we're never gonna run out.
You know what I mean? So, like I said, I have been trying, and one thing I want to do, pretty soon. Remember how we did that show on creepy disappearances? I think we did 4 or 5 different cases. I want to do another one like that because I've gotten a really lot of good suggestions for like weird disappearance cases, and I'm really into that kind of stuff. I might actually, after I finish my Faceless Villain Unsolved Murder trilogy, I have been considering doing a creepy disappearances trilogy, but we'll see how that's probably like a couple years down the line.
I don't know
we'll see how it goes.
I don't know how the audience feels, but I always wanted to do kind of stuff like, more towards the conspiracy theory stuff every now and then, about like the Central Reserve Bank, you know what I mean, and how governments were formed, the stuff on the dollar bill. I don't know if people are interested in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I have like stuff like Illuminati, like Knights Templar, that kind of stuff. Right. I have that kind of shit on there.
Secret societies.
Somebody wanted us to do like all the conspiracies about the Denver airport, which is actually
kind of
because my sister used to live there
with the statues and the mosaics.
and I've been to that airport, so it's like it's really kind of interesting. So we
are there secret tunnels underneath it for doomsday and all? Yeah,
I got into that, like I said, when my sister used to. She doesn't live there anymore, but she used to a couple of years ago.
Yeah, if we get some positive feedback on that kind of stuff, maybe we can move into that direction every now and then. If we did, there's another 5 years worth of episodes.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, because like I said, it's like I like the paranormal stuff. I'm mostly a true crime person. That's like what my area of expertise is, pretty much. So that's kind of, that's easier for me to do because a lot of the cases I've already written about, so I don't have to like go researching it and everything like that. So,
I think we mentioned this before, and in our underground series where we're talking about things that were underground.
yeah,
Being ex-military and coming out of Fort Campbell and some of the other stuff that we're up in Korea. I always wondered whether or not these military bases, the big ones here in the United States, whether or not they were connected with underground railroads and underground roads, because it makes sense that stuff came from the Cold War. It would make sense that you would assume that these bases would have to be mutually supportive in an event of a nuclear war, and you wouldn't be able to use surface roads.
See, to me, that doesn't even seem that strange. It's just, to me, that seems like, well, here's this base over here, and then there's another one, like, say, 80 miles away, and it's like, we need a way to get back and forth without people seeing us.
I never had any personal observations or any personal evidence of this, but at Fort Campbell, I was under the impression that there must have been some way to access that from underneath the ground.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Because some of this equipment, Hellfire missiles were just how did they get there? Were they flown in? Did they come in on a train? I don't know.
Yeah.
And we were stationed there. We didn't know everything about the place, how it worked. But anyway.
It's funny because that Going Underground show, that was one of the most fun ones that we did, I think. And I think it's got I think that was one of our least.
Yeah, nobody liked it.
But I liked that show. It's funny because topics that I really had fun doing. I like the Houdini and seance one. That was one of my favorite ones to do because I love that kind of shit.
Yeah.
But I feel like that had the low. It might have more views now because that was one of our oldest ones.
I just have this weird gut feeling that the United States is totally undermined with underground roads and underground railroads, and that they've interconnected mines. I saw a program that said that there were salt mines and mine shafts all underneath the United States, and that if you could map all those mines and all the stuff that they admit that's down there, you turned it into a map, like a road map, it would look about like the map on the surface. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That it's that undermined. And I saw that program. It was on the Learning Channel decades ago, and I can't find it again.
We were looking for it the other day when we were doing
the audience.
Going Underground show.
They went to one of them, and it was I think it was some kind of a mine, a bauxite mine, and they had an underground town with 3-story buildings and playgrounds and cars and street lights and everything. And it had been abandoned since, I think, the 60s, early 60s, late 50s. And they went underneath there and showed it, and it was like being outside at night. And it was creepy as hell. They were going into those apartments, and the calendars were up, and the beds were made, and all the dishes were put away. And it was under a thin layer of dust.
That shit.
And nobody had been down there forever. And it was just a bauxite mine with a town in it, an abandoned town. And they never threw. And the cars, they had cars in it going back to the early 50s. And when the car would break down, they'd just park it in a parking lot, and it sat out there for decades and decades and decades. There were, 60s cars, and I think there might have been 40s, stuff from the 40s in it too. And because why take it up to the surface? They just pushed it aside.
Why bother?
Trucks and stuff. But they had whole parking lots of cars that people drove around in that town underneath, and sitting there in the parking lots with all the tires rotted off. Nothing wrong with those cars. You could fire them up, and if you could bring them back to life. They were just abandoned down there.
Because like I said, there's they're out of the elements.
They were out of the elements, and they were company cars. They just left them.
Yeah.
But if anybody out there knows that program, I'd like to see it again. I'd like to show it to her.
Yeah, I wanted to see it, and we couldn't find it because he couldn't remember the name of it or
couldn't remember the name. I think I'm pretty sure it was on either Discovery Channel or History Channel.
Back when they used to
back when they had cool shit. And it would have been about 15, 20 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
By now.
Like I said, it sounds about right when they used to actually have educational shows instead of a bunch of bullshit.
Couldn't find it. It was amazing, the stuff that they had down there.
And like I said, that kind of shit creeps me out. Stuff that's just abandoned.
Yeah.
There's still dishes left.
And I want to.
And there's a calendar.
I want to say that was somewhere, either in Florida or Louisiana. Been a long time though.
Yeah.
My memory is kind of cloudy, but I remember what it looked like.
Well, if we can find it, we'll do a show on that. It was creepy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I liked that Going Underground one. I thought that was super fun.
It's a whole underground city, just nobody in it.
Yeah. But I think the only other shout out I got to do, our last movie retrospective was Stuart Gordon's From Beyond, starring our buddy, Jeffrey Combs. And also the very hot Barbara Crampton in S&M gear, y'all.
Yeah, with her ass hanging out.
With her ass hanging out.
Kind of flat, but it was okay. It was of the times, you know. They had that 80s look.
Yeah, I guess the big booty thing didn't come till later.
No, they were into that tight booty. It was cocaine-inspired booty.
Cocaine-inspired booty.
A coke horse, you know.
She didn't look like a coke horse.
No, but, you know.
She just looked like a normal lady. Like a normal pretty
I
lady.
remember what it was like back then.
Yeah. Well, so
yeah, it was
I'm
all about
the
implants.
same age as you.
That decade was about implants. It wasn't about booty. J-Lo had not appeared yet.
Yeah, we are kind of laughing about... What were we watching the other day that was... shit. It was some horror movie that was set in the 80s. I can't remember. It was like a slasher movie, like a forgotten one. And like we were laughing about how that awful, like high-cut underwear and bathing suits that everybody... God, I remember those. I hate that shit.
No, we were watching a review.
That's right.
We were watching a review, and it was... What was the name of that movie? It was one of those barbarian chick-type movies. And they were running around in weird sorceress outfits and shit.
That were so 80s.
And it was like, you know, the underwear that they wore looked like a big V up in your crack and everything, and it made a woman's ass look flat and really tall.
I don't know what they're... I think
it looked good from the front. They were trying to make the legs look long.
Their legs look longer. I think that's what I think that might have been the thing with the high-waisted jeans too. Maybe they thought it makes your legs look longer, but that's not how it works though. It just makes everyone look pregnant and your butt
jeans.
And your butt look flat.
We need to get to these Jinn stories.
Yeah, I know we do.
Okay,
but
we're going off on talking about ass.
What do you mean we? You started doing it. You started doing it. He always says we, but then he's the one that went off on a tangent. I'm just like sitting over here going, I don't know what to do.
It's the nature of this show.
To just go off and talk about a bunch of bullshit.
Talk about ass.
Well, yeah, that too.
Yeah.
And boobies. Sometimes we talk about boobies.
Talk about whatever.
Yeah, but that's, you guys seem to like that, so that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, but let's get to talking about Jinn.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, Jinn is kind of like, as a concept, now associated with the Islamic religion, but it actually predates that. It comes from various other belief systems in that part of the world, and then was later like incorporated into Islamic mythology. It does, they do turn up in the Quran and things like that. Now, the interesting thing about Jinn, though, is that the word Jinn actually kind of means two different things. They think that the root of the word comes from the word meaning like hidden or concealed, like a being that's concealed from the senses.
Invisible.
Right, yeah, like invisible, like humans can't perceive them, can't see them. But then another thing too is that the word Jinn pretty much refers to anything like that, but it also refers to like a particular thing. So it's weird because angels and demons and Jinn are like three different things, but angels and demons are Jinn, but Jinn are not necessarily angels and demons. You know what I'm saying? They're like a distinctive thing, but they can be used as like a more general term for like any supernatural entity, or they can be used to refer to like a specific type of entity.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of different types of them, which I'll kind of get into later. But they don't really know like where the word came from. Like I said, they think it probably came from the word meaning hidden or whatever. But there was something that was earlier on, like there's an Aramaic word, Janaea, which actually means tutelary deity, which is like a protector spirit or like a guardian spirit. So they think that maybe that could be where the word came from, and that at some point these were something like some sort of pagan deities, like nature deities or elemental spirits or something like that were later like incorporated into the pantheon. But like I said, they're not supernatural beings in the strictest sense of the word. Because unlike angels and demons, they're not immortal. They still have to eat. They still have to sleep.
They tend sheep.
They have houses. They have families. They can procreate.
They can convert to Islam. They can be Christian.
They can be different religions.
They can be satanic. They can be anything.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily evil. They can be good or evil. But so in that way, they're like humans, but like a trans-dimensional human.
Right. They're just outside of our senses in a parallel universe. And according to the legends and also things that were like written in the Quran, sometimes they can see you and interact with you. Sometimes you can see them and you can interact with them. So kind of what they're talking about is a being from its own world that's just slightly beyond this dimension.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be in contact with them, but sometimes it happens. Now, I'm under the impression that this concept of jinn is far older than Christianity, and I think it's older than Islam.
Yes,
probably older than Judaism. This is probably something, I think it sounds to me, based on what I've learned from Dr. Price, this sounds Zoroastrian to me. Probably something from Persia. That's where I think this comes from. And it may in some way be related to Sumer. The Sumerians had things like angels. They may have had things like jinn.
Yeah.
But I think this is a Zoroastrian concept. Do you know, did you find anything in your
Well, there
study?
is actually, like I said, when I was reading about the etymology of the word and where the word came from and where the belief might have come from, like I said, there was an Aramaic word that kind of referred to a similar kind of thing. There's also a Persian word that is Jaini, I guess is how you pronounce it.
Okay.
That is like like an evil female spirit, and that is from around the area of Iran, but it was Zoroastrian, but a little bit before that.
Yeah, pre-Zoroastrian.
Yes.
Then. Okay.
So there's some speculation that also might have been where the concept came from.
It's folklore.
Yeah.
And Islam inherited it.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the New Testament, some of the New Testament scriptures, and you match it up with the Old Testament scriptures, there's some disagreement about what an angel and what a demon is. In Genesis, it's inferred that a demon is one of the sons of gods that got enchained into the earth for procreating with human women. So it says that, so the Old Testament concept is that a demon is a angel being punished. But if you look at the New Testament, where you have Jesus casting demons out of a man, and they go into a pig and run, that man was in the cemetery possessed by these demons. So kind of like the Christian version of a demon is like the spirits of the evil dead. There might be a little bit of crossover between the concept of jinn and spirits of the dead. There's a possibility of that. So in Christianity, the concept of a jinn, literally a jinn, it doesn't really exist. I think probably the closest thing that Christianity has to that is what's mentioned in the New Testament of spirits of the evil dead. Maybe.
Sort of.
Maybe,
I feel
but
like
it doesn't really correlate, does it? Because
not really. It's not the same. That's what I mean.
There's
It's
no,
kind
there's
of a
no
concept.
real analog.
Yeah, it's a concept we don't have
Right.
like in Christianity. In early Judaism, Judaism, they do have a concept very similar to that. But Christianity, not so much, because the whole thing about the jinn, like I said, they were supposedly around before Adam, just like the angels were. So they were created, like angels were created out of light, like God created them out of light. He created the jinn out of what is called smokeless fire.
Smokeless fire, energy. They're talking about
energy, yes.
Energy, yeah.
And then man was created out of clay or mud.
Yeah, and you see really, even in the Apocrypha, there's nothing in the Apocrypha that equates to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is an Islamic thing. They must have inherited it from pre-Zoroastrian folklore. That's the only place this could have come from.
That's pretty much what they're thinking, because they're not entirely sure where the exact concept came from, but there's kind of a couple of schools of thought on this. It's like some scholars are like, well, maybe the jinn originally referred to spirits that hung out in like deserts and cemeteries and like, caves and that kind of shit.
That's where I was getting at with the Jesus story. That's the closest Christianity has to the jinn, is but the story about Jesus confronting a possessed guy out in a damn cemetery, possessed by the spirits of the evil dead. Jesus casts those spirits out. They go into swine. They jump into the ocean.
Yeah.
That's the closest thing we have to a Jinn.
Yeah.
And it may be that if you were to tell that story to some kind of an Islamic scholar, they would go, oh, yeah, that's a Jinn.
Yeah.
They might make that leap.
And a lot of the Jinn had sort of animalistic, kind of like it would sometimes have a cat head, or it would have wings, or it had animalistic tendencies. So there's kind of that thing. And then there's some scholars that think, much like the Christians took like pagan nature deities and turned them into demons.
That makes sense.
They think that a similar thing might have happened in this situation too, where like other supernatural beings from other, belief systems in the area were kind of incorporated
into
Jinn.
That makes sense because as ancient Egypt changed from the original Egyptian religion to Christianity and then later on into Islam, the new Islamic traditions would have come in contact with all those Egyptian stelas.
Right.
And they would see Bastet and Horus and, so they're cat-headed goddesses and falcon-headed gods.
Yeah.
And they would just go, they're not demons, they're not evil.
Yeah.
They're just Jinn. That's how they would
That's what
reference
I find like the most interesting about the concept of Jinn is that they don't necessarily, like I said, they're very like people. Yeah. Some of them are evil. Some of them can be good. Some of them can be helpful. Some of them can be neutral. It's like they're not necessarily, so even when, Islam incorporated, entities from other belief systems, they didn't necessarily demonize them.
No,
they just said, oh, well,
it's
just
Jinn.
another,
It's
a Jinn. It's another thing from another part of the world. It's not necessarily bad. They can be bad. But they're not necessarily.
Right.
And
now,
even,
a hardcore Islamic person would say, but you can't worship Jinn. That's wrong. You can only worship Allah.
There's not much evidence that anyone ever worshipped them.
I know that, but I was
There's no cults around
Well, what
them.
would happen is that a Muslim would consider the worshippers of the ancient Egyptian gods as worshiping Jinn.
Right.
Not demons.
Yeah.
They'd be Jinn-like creatures. Because they wouldn't probably condemn their own ancestors outright. They're just saying they were just incorrect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And there was a, prior to, Islam expanding, it was kind of a thing where Jinn were considered that, a lot of poets like use them as inspiration. Like a poet had their personal Jinn that would like give them inspiration in their poetry. And there was also, magicians and stuff that supposedly could control them, and get them to do their bidding, much like, Aladdin and stuff, like the ones in the lamp that we know about.
Yeah, it all kind of makes sense in the traditions, you know what I mean? You have Muslims looking at, ancient Egyptian stuff. And they're going, they're getting Jinn to serve them. That matches with what we're saying.
Right, exactly.
So that works out.
But they're
because
also...
if you actually read Book of the Dead and you know the ancient Egyptian cultures and what their religious beliefs were, they were very religious people, they were very noble, and they were very moral. In fact, a lot of the moralistic tendencies of the ancient Egyptians actually kind of look like Christianity and Islam. It was about that same thing. Yeah. They just had different tales.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the basic moral values of the ancient Egyptians were about the same as Christian and Muslim values, really.
It seems like,
not much difference.
Moral values are pretty
universal.
Common, like universal.
Don't cheat on your wife, don't steal, don't murder, it was that same.
Because humans, like I said, are really not that different no matter what culture. They just kind of interpret it through different cultural lenses, but it's generally more similar than not.
Now, you might say, well, yeah, but they all had multiple wives. That's not the same as cheating on your wife.
Yeah, that's just, they interpreted it that way.
That's just another wife.
They're like, that's another wife. I'm not cheating.
And you say, well, that's not Christian. Actually, no. If you go back to actually Christianity and really look at most of the ancient Christians actually had multiple wives. And Charlemagne had a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
If you actually read the Bible or the New Testament for what it says, religion is not, marriage isn't really between a man and a woman. It's between a man, a woman, a woman, a woman, a woman, a woman, and a woman,
etc.
And all the handmaidens that served all those women. And that's really
they were all fair game.
Yeah, go actually read what it says.
Yeah. That's why it kind of makes me laugh when like fundamentalist Christians
get upset about polygamy.
Between a man and a woman. from it, and I'm just
fundamental Christianity actually describes a relationship, marriage as between a man, a woman, a woman, a woman, a woman.
Like,
all the women that work for that woman, and any woman that you saw, and any woman that you paid for is also.
Right.
So you can't. Modern Christianity is not the same as archaic Christianity.
Exactly.
It's not the same.
Yeah, there was a lot of different shit.
There was a lot of different shit back in the past. Yeah.
But yeah. So, like I said, another interesting thing about Jinn that differentiates them from angels and demons, other than them not being immortal and having to eat and sleep and things like that like a human does, even though they're much stronger than humans and much faster than humans, like I said, they're invisible. Some of them can shapeshift. Things that they can travel really fast, like some of them can teleport, or they can go from one place to another like in a really, really short time. But the interesting thing too is that they have free will, just like humans do. So they can be other religions. They can be disbelievers. Yeah. They can be, and actually in the Quran, I think it's Surah 72, I want to say, there's a story about Muhammad he goes and, preaches to the humans, and then he goes and preaches to the Jinn. The Jinn community, like trying to get them to come to Allah or whatever.
So you're
it's
talking
like
about
a similar
parallel,
kind of thing.
These are parallel populations.
Yeah.
They're in a slightly different universe.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool idea.
It is. That's what I mean. That's what
They're
I thought
energy-based life forms.
Yeah, that's what I thought was kind of awesome about this.
Kirk, he ran across a lot of them. And green bitches. Green bitches and energy people. That's, yeah. And
there's also, there's kind of a relationship, too, with, some of the early, like I said, early Islamic texts and the early, texts of Judaism, because King Solomon was said to have been given by God control over the Jinn. So he could get the Jinn to go do stuff. Like I think he told one Jinn to go get him Queen Sheba's throne or something like that. He had some kind of control over him. There are some stories later on that said he had a magical ring and stuff, but I've heard some scholars say no, that's bullshit. God told him, hey, you can control the Jinn, and he's like, all right, cool. So I'm just going to tell the Jinn to do this and that. So there's kind of that thing too. And I think he also was able to tell the Jinn to build the first temple. So that's kind of a story that turns up in a lot of folk tales later on. So an interesting thing too, like I said, there's a bunch of different types of them, and I'll kind of probably get into that after the break. But here's something interesting. There's one particular Jinn, and his name is, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but his name is Iblis or Iblis.
Iblis, yeah. I've heard
now,
that.
he is kind of an analog to Satan or to Lucifer, in the Christian tradition, but not quite, because his character is a little more ambiguous. Generally, the story with him is that he was a Jinn, and he was somehow in heaven with all the other angels, even though he's not an angel, he's a Jinn.
Well, they can go to any dimension they want to.
Right. So, Allah says, Allah creates Adam, and then he says, okay, this is my creation. The angels and the Jinn have to bow down to Adam. But Iblis says, nah. He says, I'm made of fire. They're just made of clay or mud. I'm superior. So he refused. Right. So then he kind of, not so much gets kicked out of heaven, but he kind of falls out of favor. However, he does ask Allah, hey, can I go to Earth and fuck with the humans? Tempt them. Basically just like the early Satan did. So he actually had that similar kind of role. That
is a reboot of the Job story.
Yeah.
That's an Islamic interpretation of the same thing that happened in Job.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
So generally, Iblis is called Shaitan, obviously,
Satan.
Which Satan.
Shaitan, yeah.
Shaitan, but that is that's not his name. That's a
title.
A title.
Yeah.
And there are other ones. Evil Jinn are called Shaitans.
Shaitan Shaitan and Satan, those are titles.
Yeah.
It actually means prosecutor. Grand prosecutor.
Yeah. Or something like that. It's and he has a similar kind of role, like I said, as Lucifer.
Right.
Even though he wasn't an angel, he was actually a Jinn, but that's why.
Even in the old, Judaic stories like Job, you can interpret that story as Satan is the grand prosecutor. He's calling bullshit on Job. Yeah. He's going to say, look at Job, he's only worshiping you because of everything you gave him.
Right.
Let me go down there and put the fire on his ass and test him for you. Okay? We'll see. We'll test his mettle. Okay?
Yeah. It's like a bar bet.
Well, yeah. So what is Satan doing? Satan is actually serving God in that story.
Yeah.
As his prosecutor. Calling bullshit on believers. You know what I mean? So the idea of a rebel angel doesn't quite match up with what happened back in the Genesis story about sons of God mating with the daughters of women and creating Nephilim and being enchained in the earth. So Satan is not being punished. He's walking up and down on the fucking earth. You know, he's free. He can even go to heaven.
Yeah.
So Satan is not in hell in any of those stories. Only the enchained angels were the ones that created the Nephilim.
Yeah.
This whole idea of Satan being in hell is a modern Christian concept. Middle Ages.
Yeah.
That is not in there.
And it's also not, I mean, Iblis is not, you know, it's not a kind of thing where him and Allah are like at odds. Like
right, no, they work together.
Yeah, they work together. Like, yeah, Allah was kind of pissed because he was kind of like, well, hey, I told you to bow down to Adam and you wouldn't. But he wasn't so mad at him that he wouldn't like let him go around tempting humans and things like that. Which
now I have a Southern Baptist background. Okay, I understand apocalyptic beliefs.
Yeah.
You can't throw revelations at me and say, well, what about the beast and the dragon? From Dr. Price, I already know that the beast, the false prophet, and the dragon have nothing to do with Satan. Really, when you get down to it, the dragon is Tiamat.
Yeah.
The cosmic dragon that Marduk slayed to create the universe. The story about throwing the dragon into the pit of hell means the destruction of creation of the universe. In other words, in the end of the Revelation story, God uncreates the universe because he no longer needs it.
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about. So I'm getting wrapped up on it.
No, it's all right.
Okay, so you can't correlate Satan with the dragon.
Yeah.
Those are different characters.
And the interesting thing, too, is that in the Islamic and pre-Islamic tradition, Jinn are associated with several animals, cats and things like that, but are also probably most, they're usually most associated with snakes, serpents. So, that's another analog right there of the whole serpent in the garden, blah, blah, blah. So they kind of have their own version of it. Like I said, but they don't seem to have...
Yeah, here's another one, though, that I want to talk about this serpent in the garden.
Yeah.
And Dr. Price is going to back me up on this. The serpent in the garden was not Satan. The serpent in the garden was Asherah. And in the old pantheon, Asherah was the queen of heaven. All right? Asherah was God's wife. She was punished, okay, for actually being man's benefactor about eating the fruit of knowledge.
It's like a Prometheus.
So just like Prometheus. So man could know the difference between good and evil. God punished Asherah by making her crawl on her belly, and she became a legless creature, like a snake.
Yeah.
Okay. In the same way, Prometheus was punished for giving man fire.
Yeah.
Okay. The serpent in the garden is not Satan, it's Asherah.
Yeah.
And during that time, it's mentioned over and over again in the Old Testament about Asherah poles, because ancient Jews worshipped Asherah, right along with the Father of Heaven. What's it? El Shaddai, which is mentioned, the Father of the gods, which is this. You're talking about the Jewish analog for Zeus. The father of God, pantheon. Right? Yeah, it was a pantheon.
It would be surprising if those things didn't bleed into one another because it was.
They did.
Yeah, that's what I mean exactly.
The ancient Greek pantheon is exactly the same as the ancient Jewish pantheon. It's the same thing. They just had different names.
Yeah.
Slightly different stories.
That's what, like I said, that's what fascinates me so much about like comparative religion and comparative mythology. It's like I'm always so fascinated when I see different cultural interpretations of what's generally the same thing. It's like the same figure. And like I said, so the same thing happens here with, the whole thing with Lucifer and Iblis being pretty much, analogous type of characters.
The Jewish pantheon was just the hillbilly version of the Greek pantheon. It was. They were related. That's all it was.
All right, so let's see. We're probably
halfway.
Yeah, we're probably about the halfway point. So when we come back, I want to kind of talk about some of the different kinds of Jinn. Maybe like talk about a couple of the little stories that were in 1001 Nights about the Jinn and stuff like that. So we're gonna take a break right now. And what?
Oh, I was gonna say, boy, I tell you what.
Oh, he's
Kukulkan's tearing me up, and I'm on the subject of religion.
Yeah.
Making me kind of like.
And your little cheeks are turning red.
Okay, we're gonna talk about the gym.
I have what is this? You made it.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
it's
vodka,
vodka
and cherry and cherry and passion.
Yeah, for our Islamic listeners, don't be upset. Okay. We are going to talk about the Jinn. Okay.
Yeah, seriously, we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna.
This is holy as shit. Just ask Kukulkan Khan and the Mesoamericans. Okay, the different kind of pyramid, different kind of temples.
But otherwise, it's
I
all
sacrificed myself.
We're all the same, you guys.
To the jaguar.
All right. We're going to take a break right now. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Okay, everybody. Jenny's got some new shirt designs up. 4 of them. Really good ones, too. Atlanta Ripper, Who Put Bella in the Witch Elm, the H.H. Holmes Murder Castle, and, of course, Demon Child, because man said he could. These are updated designs. I think they look really cool. Jenny did a great job on them. Were they fun making, Jenny?
They were very fun. And thank you very much. I think they came out very good.
Yeah, they get really good. They're very high quality shirts. Jenny and I wear our own shirts at certain times when we're trying to put a spotlight on ourselves, and you can put a spotlight on yourselves. If you go ahead and pick up one of these shirts today, you guys are going to love them. Links in the description, www.zazzle.com at 13 o'clock.
Yeah, so go check out our store at www.zazzle.com/13 o'clock. We got these 4 cool new t-shirt designs, plus all our old ones if you'd rather get one of the old ones. But these ones are awesome, and you should check them out.
They're also available in women's cut, and they look really cute. Jenny's got some.
So thank you. Go check them out.
Okay, we're back. Talking about Jinn.
That's right. Getting drunk talking about Jinn.
Yeah, well, like
I'm barely holding on. I'm barely.
Really?
No, I'm just fucking with
I
you.
was going to say, you haven't even finished your
I haven't
jar.
finished that one.
Did you see somebody on YouTube, I can't remember who it was, but somebody on YouTube commented that the jar was like a third character on the show.
Yeah, it is.
Like, you have to drink out of the jar. That's just the
Right.
rules now.
Well, we're a 1970s style show. Back when I was growing up on television, when you had celebrities getting drunk on talk shows and game shows, it was hilarious.
It was super fun. You can still see a lot of them on YouTube.
Yeah.
And if we still smoked, we would smoke on
Yeah,
here
don't
too.
smoke anymore.
But yeah, we quit smoking. That was the C, but he still vapes. I actually
I vape.
vaped for a long time. That helped me quit smoking. But
I don't have any nicotine in this
No, I don't
though.
vape
It's just to make me feel better.
yeah.
It's totally psychological.
So I know a lot of people are like talking about vapes, like, oh, you're such a douche and blah blah blah. But it's like, seriously, it helped me quit smoking. So
Yeah, I was like, I smoked for nearly 20 years, and that helped me quit smoking.
yeah, I had smoked for a long time too, and it's like that actually.
It's
got us
immoral
both
to
off it.
ban those.
Yeah, because like I said,
Yeah.
it's like super helpful.
Yeah,
And
that's destroying smoking.
Yeah, which is good. That's a
Yeah,
good thing.
fuck them.
I mean, every
Philip
now and
Morris
then,
fucked me up.
every now and then, I still want one, but it's not like it used to
Yeah.
be. But yeah. So anyway, so let's talk a little bit about Jinn. So now, like I said, there were belief in Jinn or Jinn-like entities prior to Islam kind of expanding outward. But then as it kind of started to expand outward into, Turkey and Africa and various other areas around there, their deities were also kind of assimilated into it and like also called Jinn.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing too is that even though the Quran does not, as far as I know, does not specifically say that that Jinn can possess a human, like like a demon does, but that is a very common belief even today, like in a lot of the Middle East now, where belief in Jinn is still prevalent.
Well, makes
they
sense.
do believe that it can possess a person like a demon
It
does.
makes sense because there's so many stories about possession
Yeah.
from other cultures and other religions. From the Islamic viewpoint, they're going to say, well, yeah, we're not going to call you liars. Possession happens.
Yeah.
But that's Jinn.
Yeah.
That's how you rationalize it.
Because, like I said, pretty much any supernatural entity, like what we would call a vampire or a werewolf or something, or a zombie even,
Right.
is a Jinn, but it's just like a different type of Jinn.
Which that gives a religious belief or a religious culture a certain advantage.
Yeah.
Because when it comes into a new area, trying to find new customers, and instead of rejecting the beliefs of the indigenous people, you can say, no. The things that you believe in are true. But we as Muslims call those Jinn.
Yeah.
So it gives you an advantage.
Yeah, and that's like the same.
It helps your religion spread.
Right, because you're not shitting on people for
Right.
what they already believe. You're
Right.
just like, oh, well, you're right to believe
You're right,
that,
yeah, those
but it's
Jinn.
just called this.
It's called a Jinn. Right. And we have old stories about Jinn and the rules of the Jinn.
Yeah.
Which helps new people coming into the religion explain their old belief systems.
Yeah.
And
People are like,
and to
"Oh, makes
retain
total
their
sense."
belief systems. Oh, okay, yeah, so what we believed, it's still true.
Well, yeah. It
We just have a new understanding.
Yeah,
now.
it was like the same thing that Christians did when they were taking over, and they kind of incorporate a lot of pagan
Christmas
beliefs, like
and-
Christmas and Easter and things like that. And they just said, "Oh, well, you guys can still do that, except now we're calling it this and
Right.
we're interpreting it this way."
Right.
But you're doing the same thing. You know what I mean?
Halloween, good example.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the same thing that happened here. So like I said, there's still like a lot of possession stories, particularly in Morocco. There's a lot of stories, and actually on YouTube, there's a whole bunch of videos of people that are possessed by Jinn and like doing exorcisms
and
stuff.
I've listened to imams that speak English tell Jinn stories, and Muslims love Jinn stories.
Yeah.
In fact, they start warning the people. They go, I know you guys want me to tell you Jinn stories. We're not supposed to tell them Jinn stories.
Well,
But
it's
I
just
know
like,
I
it's
want
good
to. You want to
stories.
hear Jinn stories and this and that. We need to be talking about Allah. But I'll tell you what, today, just so you stop bothering me, I'm going to tell you stories about the Jinn. Then the imams start telling stories about Jinn.
Like I said, ghost story.
Because they're
Everybody
young
loves
guys
ghost
in it.
stories
They're young guys in
everywhere in the world.
Yeah, they're young guys in the mosque, and they want to hear fucking exciting stories about the damn Jinn.
I was actually
You know,
listening to BuzzFeed has this podcast. I'd never heard of it before, but it's called "If You See Something, Say Something," and it's basically on like growing up Muslim in America. And it's just like a bunch of young like hip people or whatever. And I was listening to their show. They did a show about Jinn, and it's just funny because these are all like 20-somethings. They're very Americanized.
Yeah.
And they said everybody's grandpa and great grandpa has awesome
Story
fucking
about damn
Jinn
Jinn.
stories. Everybody, and it's just like how funny. It's just funny because that's something that I didn't really experience. It's ghost stories pretty much. That's
Basically.
the same thing that we have. Because I have ghost stories in my family too.
Right.
But one of my favorite ones was like one of the guys that was on there was talking about his grandfather actually wrote a book about his great-grandfather's, all his stories about Jinn and stuff like that. And one of them in there, and this is a very common thing in like supernatural entities, like just cross-cultural pretty much, is like they're afraid of salt. Like if you make like a ring of salt around yourself, like you're safe for whatever reason. So he's talking about how his grandfather's great-grandfather was like in this ring of salt, and he sees like all these evil female Jinn like coming out, and they were all holding babies, and then like one of them starts eating the baby that it was holding. I was like, holy shit. And it's like, and he kind of fainted inside the salt ring, and then like he was almost out of the salt ring, but then he woke up and he was okay. And like his buddy was like, oh man, if one hair of you had come out of that salt ring, the evil Jinn would have got you. It was a great fucking story. I'm like, eating babies, holy shit.
Yeah, and it's funny because like there's such a huge difference between American Muslims in Europe, and Muslims in the Middle East. Because I lived in Egypt for 6 months when I was with the army, and Egyptians were a freaking trip. All right, they're super friendly. It's a weird society. I was hanging out mostly in a place called Sharm el Sheikh, which is in the Sinai Peninsula, and there as a MFO soldier under the UN, I was kind of like a policeman at the time. So I made a lot of friends with the guys in the local businesses there. And Jinn didn't have anything to do with it. I got to stop talking about it, really.
No, what? What were you going to say?
I'm just going to say, it was... The way Egyptian people are, at least this was back in the 90s. The way they are is not really. I hear a lot of stereotypes here in the U.S. the way Muslims are.
Yeah.
They're not really like that when you meet them. They're really fucking hilarious. They're nice people, The weirdest thing about it is that at the time that I was there, because of their religious beliefs, women just don't walk around freely. It was almost kind of like there was just nothing but men everywhere.
Sausage.
It was like the world's largest gay bar, but they're not gay. I guess it's hard to say. It's just
Well, I'm sure
it's
some
a
of them
weird,
probably
it's a
are
weird,
statistically.
it's a weird situation.
Sausage fest, like I said.
Yeah,
The whole world
Yeah.
feels like a sausage fest
Yeah.
sometimes. Just saying.
yeah, and you're not sure whether or not these guys like you or they're trying to fucking put a move on you. It's weird. It's weird. It's fucking weird.
Welcome to women's problems, like
Yeah.
all the time. Seriously.
I was in my 20s back then, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So fucking, handsome motherfucker like me, it just, shit, weird shit, you know what I mean? These guys that do weird shit sometimes.
He was. I mean, you're a cutie pie still, but it's like he was. You looked like you looked a little Tom Cruisey, that type of thing.
Yeah.
You had that kind because his hair is black.
Yeah, my natural hair is black. It
His
still
nat-
is black.
His natural hair color is black.
black, yeah.
So he had like black hair, and back in the '80s, you had like that feather thing, like everybody had.
Yeah.
I even had it.
My granddad had some Middle Eastern heritage in him, it's rumored. Probably Syrian.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where all the black hair came from.
One time
My granddad on my mother's side.
Yeah.
The Weems side, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, because one time I photoshopped him onto the cover of a teen book
Yeah.
from 1983 that had like C. Thomas Howell or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of erased C. Thomas Howell and put him
Yeah.
in there, and everyone bought it. Like I put it up on Facebook, just like.
Yeah,
not
I
saying
look like a
anything.
teen idol.
Yeah, and everybody was like, "What? You were on Teen Beat back
Yeah,
in
it's
1983
on Tiger
or whatever?"
Beat, Teen
Everybody's like,
Beat,
yeah,
yeah.
I think it was Tiger Beat. Yeah.
Yeah, Tiger Beat.
That was one of.
I was like one of the hidden members of Duran Duran.
I know. I'm gonna have to find that fucking picture. I also photoshopped him into a picture with the Go-Go's. That was actually my favorite one.
Yeah.
Because that was like a perfect. I found a perfect photo.
You gotta
of the
throw that
Go-Go's.
shit up here on the video.
If I can find it,
Yeah.
I don't remember where they went to. Because like I did those a long time ago. I photoshopped him into a photo with Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
Evil Knievel. I did like a whole bunch of them. They were super fun.
Yeah.
And I think I did a good job. I think they
Yeah, and
looked
at
super
16,
real.
and at 16, I was probably the whitest motherfucker ever. I had super black hair and fucking like white skin. And I got photographs of it. You need to show 'em.
Yeah.
I look like the teenage male version of goddamn, what was her name? Fucking, oh shit, I forgot. Demi Moore.
Oh. He's like the male Demi Moore.
The male Demi Moore.
Yeah, I
yeah.
can see that. I can
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah.
He did kind of look like, yeah.
And people tell me that back in those days. You like Demi Moore? I said, man, I'm a boy.
Well, Demi Moore, if Demi Moore.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's kind of what you do. Kind of look like that a little bit. He did back in the day, like I
In
said.
those days.
It's hard to tell now because your hair is blonde, and you
Yeah.
look like totally different with blonde hair.
Yeah.
But like I said, normally he has black hair. That's what that's what color his hair is. So anyway, like I said, there's this whole thing with this. Now let's kind of talk about types of Jinn.
Yeah, because they fall into classifications.
They fall into classifications.
Right,
Now,
yeah.
only 3 types of Jinn are actually mentioned in the Quran, but there's actually way more of that, like in folklore tradition and stuff like that. Now, one of these is the ghoul. And it's in Arabic tradition, it's spelled Ghul, but it's basically the same thing as a Western ghoul. That's where the concept came from. These are like grody, cannibalistic zombie type things that eat flesh and bones.
Rotten flesh.
And they hang out in cemeteries and they're all yucky.
Which this actually kind of supports the Jesus story I referenced earlier, where there's a possessed man out in a cemetery and Jesus throws the spirits of the evil dead out of him. So, the Islamic interpretation may have been that he was possessed by ghouls.
Yeah. And
Ghouls that were Jinn that was there to eat the rotten flesh, and they got into this man and
yeah.
you throw him out into pigs.
So, like I said, this is kind of like Jinn being like an umbrella term for every single. So this is kind of like your zombie or your ghoul.
Yeah.
This is what this is. Evidently, the most feared type of ghoul is a female one because women be scary.
Bitches are crazy, man.
Like I said, bitches be crazy.
When they get those supernatural powers, you're fucked.
Man, I wish I had some fucking supernatural powers. I would abuse that shit big time. I'm telling you right now. So nobody give me supernatural powers except you. But yeah, so the female type is called a ghoulah. Now, she can actually disguise herself as a regular looking girl. So she will like kind of worm her way into a dude's heart and then eat him.
Yeah. That's what women do, though.
That's what I was gonna say.
Worm their way into a man's heart
like,
and then they fuck you up. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just gonna. That's cool. Yeah, do that. Yeah,
We got lots of those here in Florida. We got lots of those here in Florida.
That's right.
I can even point them out on Facebook.
We're worming our way into your hearts so we can eat you later. Just
Ones with all those hot photos, no, and colored hair, no.
I'm not like that, am I?
No, you're all right.
I'm all right.
If you weren't all right, I wouldn't be with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm cool.
I'm gonna show them to you.
Now, some versions of the ghoul, actually, the Persian tradition has it where they have like donkey legs and then they have like goat horns and shit like that. But like I said, most of them they kind of look zombie-like, or they can look like a normal person that busts out and eats you later on. There's also ones that are called Jinn, and these are usually not shape-shifting, but they usually kind of show up as dogs or dog-like creatures. Usually like piebald type of dogs are associated with Jinn. There's also one, this is kind of one of the more famous ones, is called, and I think I mentioned this before, an Ifrit or an Ifrit.
Yeah, in Dungeons and Dragons, they were called the Ifriti.
Yeah, so
They're like fire spirits.
Right, it's the same type of thing.
Fire spirit.
Now, these are actually mentioned in the Quran just one time. This is actually, the reference from the Quran is from, this is the one that Solomon told to go, get the Queen of Sheba's throne. That was an Ifrit. These are actually usually evil. They're called infernal. They're usually really strong, like really smart, really calculated. They're usually like really, really big. They're made of fire. They have wings and shit like that. They can be male or female. They hang out in kind of like ruins, or they live in caves like underground or something like that.
Kind of like the Southern Baptist concept of what a demon is, actually.
Yeah, these are actually the
fire
most
demon.
demon-like.
Yeah.
And they actually live in a human-like society that's kind of like a tribal type society. They usually have, it's hierarchical. They have kings and, various other type of things. Tribes, clans, that type of stuff. They actually have marriages. They have stuff like that. But they have been known to marry humans in folklore. Also,
I might want to marry some ass over down there.
In case, you want to, in case they get bored with hanging out with other fire demons and want to, like, marry some boring-ass human, then, of course.
They got porn of that.
They have porn of everything. That's Rule 34. Rule 34, there's porn of everything. But evidently, that's, like, you can't, like, do anything to them, like, with regular weapons. Like, you can't, like, kill them with a sword or nothing like that. But apparently some people can do magic on them and, hurt them and stuff like that. There are other ones that are called Jinn. Now, these ones are shapeshifters, rather like werewolves, I suppose. Although they usually come out like camels. They're usually associated with, like, they can turn into camels. They can also be wind. And there's kind of like an association there between wind demons and, like, Pazuzu.
Yeah.
It was a real demon, like if you saw The Exorcist. They didn't just pull that out of their ass. That's an actual wind demon.
Yeah.
Ooh, kitty.
What? There's just
Yeah, the kitty came in. I just saw her in the background. And sometimes, like, when there's windstorms in the desert, some folklore says that that's like Jinn fighting with each other, because they're associated with, like, wind and windstorms and mists and things like that. But yeah, so Jinn are. They generally hang out in the desert, and sometimes, like in a lot of folkloric stories from this part of the world, they will, if they like a band of travelers, they will help you out. If they don't like you, they will fuck you up. Also, they will help out armies that they like. So they'll kind of pick a side in an army and help them out. So there's, like, a lot of kind of folkloric stories about the Jinn, like, helping out one side or another in a particular battle. There's also ones called Marid. And these are also mentioned in the Quran. These are actually really, really big. These ones also turn up in 1001 Nights. And actually, the word Marid, I think, is still refers to a giant in various Arabic languages. These are the ones, I think that this type is kind of more like the Genie type, where like they're in the bottle and they come out and they're really powerful and they can do all this kind of stuff. Because like I said, not all Jinn can be controlled by people, and not all of them have the same powers. Like some of them are stronger than others.
It's funny
just
that
like
you
various
mentioned
humans.
that. Remember I was telling you about the guy that I worked with who was from Iraq? Mm-hmm. And I told him about Mammoth Mountain. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh yeah, that's a Jinn. Part of what he said was he said that there was a certain kind of witch that they had in Iraq.
Yeah.
And I don't think she was Muslim. I think he was talking about some kind of Zoroastrian witch. And they could come and trap a Jinn. That they would actually come to a house where there was some kind of weird poltergeist type phenomena going on. And they would come into the house and you would pay this guy and he'd trap this Jinn, and then he would use it. He would trap it inside of a bottle and use it to find treasure on his own.
Yeah.
And if it was a good one, sometimes he would pay you for the Jinn that he got. That was some weird shit.
Yeah, because I think
Which
I think a lot of the shit about people that do witchcraft or sorcery or magic or other kind
Yeah.
of stuff, it's like it's never interpreted as that person like doing it. It's always like, oh, they control a Jinn, and the
Right.
Jinn is the one doing all this stuff, like telling them the future or whatever the power would be.
Right.
And like I said, poltergeist activity in that part of the world
Kind of,
is
they would
generally
interpret that as
considered-
a Jinn.
right, and that's kind of really interesting. And also, there have been like all these kind of scholarly things where they're talking about Jinn and what metaphorically that could mean. And sometimes they'll say something like, oh, it's like some kind of quantum energy, or it's some kind of interdimensional being, or it could be like a metaphor for a virus or bacteria, because a lot of them were said to cause illnesses and things
And
of
I've
that
seen
nature.
classic poltergeist phenomena myself personally, and people in my family. If a person were there in the house with us at that time, had suggested that a poltergeist could find a lost object, maybe located gold, I bet you it would have done it.
Yeah.
So maybe in a poltergeist type situation, a person could actually channel the poltergeist phenomenon into a profit-making situation
Enterprise, sure.
where you actually get a message of where some gold was lost.
Yeah.
Because I think it has to do with kind of like some kind of quantum knowledge, you know what I mean? Like accessing some kind of a Akashic record
Yeah.
of where something was lost. I saw a program the other day where a physicist was talking about like hyperdimensional geometry. And that as you back up off of dimensions, parts of us touch everything in other dimensions. Well, that's some weird. I couldn't comprehend it. He says if you could understand quantum physics, then you're lying.
Yeah.
But it could be every place is here. You know what I mean? Where you
Yeah.
are is in another dimension attached to somewhere else. And if you could access that information, you could find out where anything was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because every place is this place.
Every place is this place. If you start going up into higher dimensions.
Right, I gotcha. It's almost kind
We
of
only
like
know
going
3.
up higher and higher and higher
right.
so you can see farther.
Right, exactly. Because
Makes more
we're
sense on
only in
acid.
3 dimensions right now.
Right.
As far as, but maybe there's more of us in a higher, like a 4th spatial dimension. And that 4th spatial dimension may have access to every place in these 3 dimensions.
Right.
There's something about, what do you call it, E8. Some kind of hyperdimensional geometrical theoretical object that less than 100 guys on the planet truly understand. Aliens
Reality's
would understand
weird, man.
E8, yeah.
Reality's weird.
Yeah.
That's why, well, like I said, that's why I was kind of fascinated by the whole Jinn thing, because it's almost like way back then they had a concept
of other dimensions.
that,
Right.
but they just humanized it.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like,
And they
oh,
made
it's these
stories and
beings,
legends.
Yeah,
Right.
that were in like another dimension,
Right.
essentially. But they didn't have the words to express that.
Right.
But that's pretty much what they were talking about.
That's what they're talking about.
It was
Right.
like somebody, they're like around us all the time, but we just can't see them. Like
Right.
we can't perceive them with our senses.
Right.
That's kind of exactly what they're talking
And
about.
in the Islamic cultures, they're doing with these jinn what we did with spirits of the dead.
Yeah.
Ghosts.
That's
and
what
angels.
I mean. Yeah, it's pretty much the same concept.
Pretty much same concept. Just
Yeah.
we're putting it on a different entity.
Yeah.
Right.
And like I said, I like the idea that they didn't necessarily say, oh, they were all bad. They were just like people. Some of them sucked and some of them were awesome. Like
you
some
could
of
preach
would
to
help
them.
Right, yeah. Like you could actually go and some of them would be like, oh, yeah, I'll be a Muslim or I'll be a Christian or whatever. Because they could be whatever religion. There were Buddhist ones. They were all, they were all different.
Well, during this era where all these stories are coming around, a lot of the Muslims were Bedouin.
Yeah.
Call them Bedouina. And, you know, if you're ever out in the desert at night in Bedouin areas, I've been there. It's beautiful at night, you know what I mean? And you're around the campfire and you're looking at stars. The way the sky looks is awesome in that part of the world. You're going to tell stories. Yeah. And your mind's going to, you know... So, you know... You're going to have fan fiction based on, you know... You're going to start writing fan fiction based on old religions. Yeah. And that's where this stuff's coming from.
And like I said, you kind of have, like, pretty much every type of jinn has, like, an analog in another type of supernatural creature. You got your shapeshifters, you got your ghouls. You got kind of some that are, like, vampiric, sort of.
Yeah.
Also, I think there's actually one called a Pallas or a Palus that's essentially like a vampire, except he sucks blood out of your feet. Like the bottom of your feet.
Yeah.
Like the only way you can thwart him by like sleeping with your feet against somebody else's head, or like I guess wearing socks or shoes would probably thwart him as well. Because some of the jinn are like not so smart and they can be outsmarted by people, but some of them are actually much smarter. But there's actually one too. There's one called a Nasnas, and that's I think there's a couple stories about him in the 1001 Nights, and this is like super weird. He's like half human, not in the sense that he's half human and half something else, but he's just like half of a person. Like he has a half of a head, he has one arm and one leg, and he like hops around.
Damn.
Like on
he's a half human.
Yeah, that's exactly, because I was reading it, like half human, half what?
But is there another half walking around somewhere else?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe not. Maybe he's just like the whole being, but
yeah.
that's just like what he's like, right?
Okay.
So that's like pretty weird, right? And that an extension of that, there's kind of a version of that from Somalia that is kind of like similar, that he's just like a half little person that's hopping around. And evidently there's a belief that if this one thing touches you, then you'll die.
Yeah.
You know. So like I said, so you got your shaitan, which are like the evil ones, kind of, you know, like a Satan or a demon type figure. These ones actually, the interesting thing about the shaitan, or the shaitan ones, is that they lay eggs like snakes.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Which I thought that was pretty weird. And they're always like really ugly, or like really serpentine type of. And then there's also one called a sheik, which is like a kind of a lower form one. They usually look like monsters. And then there's one called a silat, which is usually like a really smart one, and they can also shapeshift into various animals and stuff like that. So like I said, I think the kind of, you know, the most common stories that people know in the West are the Aladdin story and I Dream of Genie, which, like I said. And it's weird because the Aladdin story is not... That actually wasn't in the original 1001 Nights. That was actually added in the 18th century, 17th, 18th century, when there was a French translation of it. And somebody, like whoever wrote the French translation, had heard this story from like a Syrian or something like that, of Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp, and put it in there. So this actually wasn't a super, you know, so the perception of like a genie popping out of a lamp and giving you, you know, what you want.
Wishes, yeah.
And stuff like that. It's not a real common theme. Although one of the more famous stories in the 1001 Nights is actually called The Fisherman and the Genie. And it's kind of a similar thing where it's like there's this fisherman and his wife, and he goes out to the little pond every day, and he throws his net into the pond 4 times every day. I don't know why just 4, but he just like 4 times every day. And then he does okay, like he pulls in fish and stuff like that. But this one day, he is just having shit luck. It's like he throws his net in the first time, He pulls it back up. There's like a dead horse or a dead donkey in there. And he's like, fuck me. And then he throws the net back out. Then he pulls it back in. And this time it's just like a jar full of sand or some kind of shit. And he's like, what the fuck? And then like he throws it back in. Then he pulls it back. And then it's like fucking broken pottery pieces. And he's like, God damn it. So it's like he throws it back one more time. Then he pulls it back in. And there's like a little copper jar. And it has like the seal of Solomon on it. And he's like, oh, what's this? And so he pries it open and poof. Out comes a genie. Now the genie does not say, oh, I grant you 3 wishes. First, he thinks the dude is King Solomon because King Solomon was the asshole that put him in there, right? So he's like, no, I'm not King Solomon. And he's like, okay, well, here's the deal. He's like, King Solomon died like 1,000 years ago, man. It's like, you're so out of the loop. So the fisherman is like, I'm not King Solomon. So the genie says, all right. He's like, first 100 years that I was in this fucking jar, I was like, whoever gets me out of this jar, I'm going to give him all this wealth and stuff. And then nobody let me out. So like 100 years later, oh, well, maybe someone will let me out now and I'll give him 3 wishes. But that didn't fucking happen either. He's like, now like 400 years later, now I'm fucking pissed. And now I'm thinking whoever finds this jar and opens it, I'm just going to kill his ass. But I will let him choose how he dies.
Okay.
So that's what he says to the fisherman. Just choose how you die. The fisherman's like, wait. And he's like, let's just think about this for a second. And he's like, let me just tell you a story. So then they start telling each other stories. So then they become buds, right? So then finally the genie's like, all right, well, I won't kill you because you seem like an all right dude. So he's like, so I'll give you something cool. So he tells him that there's this pond. He's like, go to this one pond and put your net in like you usually do, like 4 times. But whatever you catch, you got to take it to the Sultan, right? So the guy's like, okay. So he goes and he puts, and he just does the net and everything. And he brings in like all these really beautiful fish. Like they're all like these all crazy colors and stuff like that. So he does what the genie says and he takes him to the Sultan. And then it turns out that the town that the Sultan was, ruling over had been cursed by some sorceress or some shit. And they had turned like all the people in the town into fishes. So those were like the townspeople in there. So the fisherman had actually brought them out and said, hey, here's the pond where that stupid bitch like put all these fucking fish in there. And he's like, now we can turn them back into humans. They found out where the sorceress was and they destroyed her. And so the fisherman was like, the Sultan was like, man, the fisherman, he's the man. He showed us where the pond was. We got all our people back. And so they gave him like all these riches and the genie gave him all these riches. So that's kind of where the seed of the Aladdin story came from. But like I said, it's not so much, there was the whole thing about King Solomon being able to control genies and stuff like that. But it's just a very small part of Jinn lore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's funny that seemed like the main thing that people in the West like know about genies. But yeah, so before we wrap it up, I just wanted to talk about a couple of sort of similar things or like kind of a prologue to the type of Jinn story. Like I said, I think I mentioned before Pazuzu from The Exorcist, who actually was like a real thing. He was a Sumerian wind demon type thing. Also kind of similar to the Jinn concept. He sort of had like a dog-like head and like a snake penis and shit like that.
Well, shit.
And wings and whatnot.
Who wouldn't want that?
Would you?
Snake penis? You're talking about anaconda, right?
Let's really think of this.
Okay,
would you want like it?
Nah,
would you want it to have like poisonous?
Talking shit.
Yeah. Now, one of the most interesting things that I thought was like in very, very old Judaism and like a lot of the folklore from that period, they actually had a thing called a shedim, which was almost exactly like a jinn. It was pretty much, it was invisible, like most humans couldn't see it, but they still like procreated, they still had to eat, they still had to sleep, and it was also kind of like they were around before Adam and then like basically like got replaced by humans and they were like jealous about it. So that kind of concept was floating around in the area before the concept of jinns really like codified in one type of thing. So there have been like kind of analogs in, prior to the Islamic concept and prior to, this, like I said, we don't really have, there's not an exact thing in the Christian tradition. I think we kind of maybe lost that. But Judaism did have a concept very similar to jinns. We just sort of lost it. I think Christians just kind of were just like, everything's demons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Angels and demons, that's it. And
Yeah.
ghosts.
Whereas demons and jinn are two very distinct entities. Like
Although you could say that Christians also believed in vampires and werewolves.
true.
That might be in, but those are more like monsters, not really supernatural.
It's not a theological concept.
not religious. No,
It's more a folkloric.
more like something from the natural
concept.
world.
Because I feel like jinn, they have a folkloric component, but it's a theological concept. Like I said, they're in the Quran. They're mentioned like 28 times, 30 times, something like that in the Quran. So they are a thing, in Islamic theology and in pre-Arabic, before
And
Islam
I have to
took
say
over.
that to any non-Western people living. You're listening.
We hope you're living.
Christians believed in vampires and werewolves not because they were in the Bible. They weren't in the Bible.
Right.
It's because they kept finding dead women.
Yeah.
So something did this. They didn't really think it was men doing it. They thought it was men that turned into wolves or dead people walking around killing people.
Yeah.
That was the explanation.
Because they were
basically.
like too naive to think that just like a regular
Right.
dude could do that kind of shit.
Basically, what werewolves were serial killers.
Yeah. I kind of feel like, that
Yeah,
was probably
and
the case. People doing fucked up shit and they couldn't conceive. Or they
yeah,
couldn't do
and
anything.
vampires was basically tuberculosis or the plague.
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about. Whole families, they find them dead in the house.
I do feel
Gotta be a vampire.
And actually, a lot of the
Right.
vampire mythology that kind of came, because we talked about this a little
Right.
bit on our
It was
Nosferatu
TB,
review.
tuberculosis.
Yeah, it
or-
was like, it's basically a plague. Analog. As a,
Yeah.
that's pretty much exactly what they're talking about.
And in the vampire stories, wherever a vampire was, plagues were there. No,
Right.
vampires were the plague. The plague was the vampires.
Yeah.
That's all it was. People dying of death.
Speaking of vampires, we actually watched it's on Shudder. We watched
Yeah.
the Dan Curtis Dracula that had Jack Palance as Count Dracula.
Made a good Dracula.
It was actually pretty good.
Not bad,
I had heard
not
about
bad.
it, but it was made for TV, I believe.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. But I had heard about it like over the years and I'd never seen it. So we actually it actually streamlined the story a lot. Took out Renfield, which I
Right.
thought was very odd. Took out Quincy Morris, which most adaptations do. Actually, Jonathan Harker's role was significantly depleted. Like, he was kind of like in the beginning of it, and then he kind of disappeared for a long time. I'm like, did everyone just forget about Harker? What happened to him? And then, like, he sort of turns up at the end, like, for 5 seconds. But, it concentrated more on Lucy and Mina and that kind of stuff. But it was actually not bad. I quite enjoyed it. Maybe we'll do a review
Right.
of it on some point. Some point. But yeah, it's on Shudder if you want to watch it. All right, so I think we've probably gone on long enough. Unless you have anything else you'd like to add about Jinn,
No.
like I said.
Jinn were the Islamic explanation for the paranormal. If they ever saw paranormal stuff, they would go, well, that's a Jinn.
Yeah.
Because it was already in their
mythology.
in their mythological lexicon.
Right.
So let's just say you had an old Arab walking around out in the desert and he sees a damn alien spacecraft flying through the air. He's going to say, I saw a Jinn.
Well, yeah, and like I
Right,
said,
right.
when I was watching that BuzzFeed video, like
Right.
one girl, she said basically, I mean, she was she had grown up Muslim. She was a paranormal investigator though, and she said, okay, basically, whereas in the United States, if you see something weird, you're going to attribute it to UFOs
Ghosts or UFO.
Bigfoot or something
Yeah.
like that. She's like, whereas in the Middle East, it would basically be, well, it was a Jinn.
It's a Jinn.
It's just like some, form of Jinn. And
That was the cultural reference that they had.
right,
so-
exactly. And like I said, they could manifest themselves in lots of different ways. So it was almost kind of like, yeah, all the stuff like vampires, werewolves, aliens, whatever, it's all just one thing. They're just
Right.
turning up in different.
They inherited stories about Jinn.
Yeah.
So if they saw something they couldn't explain, they would just say it was the Jinn that did it.
Yeah. I saw this
So there's
really...
a good chance that maybe in the Islamic part of the world you'd have poltergeist and ghost and maybe even UFO phenomenon happening. They're going to tell you a Jinn story after they saw some shit like that.
Yeah. I read some really,
Right.
really good ones.
Right.
Like I said, everybody had a good Jinn story. you know, when they ask for one. Because like I said, it's like everybody's got a good ghost
Some
story.
Jinn stories are hoaxes. You can find those online on
just like ghost
Facebook.
stories,
There's some really cool things where they got some guys in a mosque and they're standing around this little fucking thing that it's got a suit on and it's praying to Allah and it's something. I don't know if it's a snake with something thrown over it or if it's a little robot, a remote controlled creature or something doing this back and forth. But it's moving back and forth and it's praising Allah and it's singing. And they're in the mosque. They're going to say it's a Jinn. I think it might have been a snake.
Yeah.
With a towel thrown over it. It's hard to say.
I saw one like on that channel, that top 5 channel.
Yeah.
And they said like top 5 creepiest Jinn sightings or whatever. And most of them were just like standard, like looked like standard possession type stuff, which is like people flailing around and screaming. But the first one was supposedly was some kind of like CCTV camera footage.
Yeah.
And it was pretty weird because it looked like this dude that was just crawling around in the street, like in the middle of the night, like in the snow.
Yeah.
And it was like the quality of it was bad, but it looked like a dude just crawling around. And you're like, what the fuck? Is he just like super drunk? Or I figured he was just like a drunk. But they were like making it so like, oh, well, that's obviously a Jinn. It's not just some drunk dude like crawling around the street.
Don't for one second think that fucking Arabs won't try to hoax your ass, because they will.
Everyone will try
I
to
saw
hoax you
some
if they
fucking
think you can get
badass
away with it.
videos that they made where they made this little deformed dog-like looking body, and a guy put his face up in it, so you see his head and it's got this little bitty body. It's totally hoaxed, and they're videotaping him and he's like going ah.
Was it a good hoax at least?
Oh yeah, it looked
It looked
awesome.
good?
It looked awesome, and if you look at there was all this little Arabic, they were making comments on it all in Arabic, and and this is back when you could ask for translations on
Right, yeah.
YouTube. They don't do that anymore, and you could hear them going, "Oh, that's a hoax," or "Oh no, that's fucking awesome," or "Oh, that's Jinn," and people need to stop having sex with animals, that kind of shit.
Yeah, you guys knocked that
It's
off.
fucking hilarious. Arabs got a sense of humor. They do.
Did it look like the dog with the human head, like from Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
Yeah, it was.
did kinda
It
look
was.
like that?
It
Maybe
looked
that's
like
where they got the idea.
looked like a cross between a dog and a baby with a human head, and its eyes are moving. It's going ah, and it looked like it was like sitting on top of something, and it was behind bars, like they had it in a cell.
Yeah. I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to go look that up now.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
that
It was a
shit.
trip.
I love a good
trip.
paranormal hoax.
Yeah, it was a hoax.
Especially if they're well
Yeah.
done. If I'm
Yeah.
just like, hey, you almost got me there. They never.
Yeah,
do.
I lived in Egypt. Arabs will hoax the fuck out of you.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, they're like everybody else.
Like I said, it's like everybody else. They can
It's
get
fucking
away with
fun.
it. They're just like, hey, I can make a video.
And
with
it's
like a dude
usually
with a dog
around
head.
the Quran, and it's usually around fucking Jinn, and
Yeah, like I said.
they're having fun with it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
You should. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this show. Hope I didn't get too much shit wrong, because like I said, this was a topic I didn't know a lot about. So I spent the last couple days researching it, and actually it was kind of fascinating, like all the stories and stuff. And I just find the whole, like I said, comparative religion, comparative mythology thing really fascinating. So hopefully you guys did too. And also, if you like the show, remember to like, share, subscribe on all your social media. And if you'd like to financially support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/13o'clockpodcast, or you can go to our blog, which is 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com. And there's a link in the sidebar to a PayPal account if you'd like to give a one-time donation if you don't want to use Patreon for whatever reason. Also, remember to check out our regular episodes, like this one right here, which come out every Tuesday. We also do a movie retrospective, old movie, that comes out every Friday. And we do new movies, 3 of them, that we go see in the theater every week, and those come out on Sunday. It's called 13 O'Clock Matinee, so check that out if you haven't already. And that will do it for episode 119, and we will see you next time. Bye.